what I learned early on as a parent was not to take no for an answer. When you know something's not right, you know something's not right. I knew that something was wrong with my son very, very early on, and could not find anyone who would do any testing for him at all until I moved back home to South Dakota. But by that time, he was 6.5. And I often wonder, had we had some of the services we see now in our little guys who are a year old, what kind of progress we would have made with my son that may have lessened the severity of the challenge that he experiences right now. And so early intervention is really, really key for quality of life later on. One of the important things to understand is that autism is a developmental disability. And what that means is this and in the case of autism, we typically see that start to manifest before the age of 3. Typically, most people will indicate it's about 18 months. The challenge is that this tends to, especially with children with autism, can be a lifelong challenge. And the earlier we can get a diagnosis, the sooner we can provide services and treatments and behavior modifications for that child. The earlier they learn that, the more we can lessen the effect that may have in a lot of really important areas in their lives. I've known some professionals who have interacted with children from a very early age, say at about the age of 18 months or so, and have had continual interaction with them, to the point that if they're on the mild or moderate end of the spectrum, some of those behaviors that you would typically see in first or second grade that are very problematic for children that have not had any treatment, you see that sometimes that symptomology is almost not there. Now, it doesn't mean that the child doesn't have autism, but it does mean that there have been a lot of behavioral interventions that have made it so that that child has an easier time of dealing with some of the challenges that they have on a day-to-day basis. One of the things that we see, autism comes with a lot of behaviors in the social and emotional realm. And it's not to say that people with autism don't experience emotions. They care very deeply about their families. They care very deeply about their environments and other kinds of things in their lives, especially animals. The challenge is that they don't have the ability to, like most people do just kind of innately, they don't have the ability to communicate that to people. And so then sometimes we see some maladaptive behaviors that start to come along with all of those things. And if we intervene at an early age, then we kind of head those behaviors off at the pass, so to speak, so that as children are growing and kind of starting to learn behavior, we teach what the appropriate behavior is. We don't assume that those children will naturally just innately pick up those appropriate behaviors that we see in a more normal child. So enabling them to learn those things because we've taught those things to them lessens the numbers and amounts of negative behaviors that we typically see in kids who have not had some of those kinds of interventions until later in life. I think that one of the challenges that I see with some parents who are not well informed is they assume that because their child does not act in a manner that they consider to be typical when it comes to responding to others, and some of the emotional give and take, when they can't participate in that, some people assume that they don't care, that they don't have any depth of feeling or anything like that. And the fact is that the opposite is true. They care very deeply about a number of things. They're just not able to communicate that to you in a manner that you would understand. But that brings up another challenge for individuals with autism, that is so misunderstood and that is such a big challenge for them, that suicide is actually the number 2 cause of early death in individuals with autism. I would agree that there are a lot of parents who perhaps out of fear of the unknown, are really reluctant to have children given such a huge diagnosis. And I understand that. I have a son on the more severe end of the autism spectrum. But one of the things that comes with that diagnosis is, first of all, as a parent, it's absolutely appropriate to grieve for what you will not have with this child because of their disorder. But also, by the same token, it gives you a chance to kind of plant your feet and say, okay, this is what we have. Where's our path forward? What are we going to do for our son or our daughter? How are we going to make that happen? And when you do that, you then can connect with a lot of other professionals who are charged with providing the services that you need. Some kids have a real difficulty with spoken language, so you bring in speech pathologists for that. Others need physical therapy. Others need occupational therapy, behavioral interventions. ABA is big right now in Kansas as a behavioral modification. So once you have that diagnosis, it gives you access to a lot of services that your child would not otherwise be able to access.
In that situation.
Right, and you're absolutely correct. Children with autism, especially if they're on the moderate or more severe end of the autism spectrum, need a lot of services, and those services can only be typically acquired in larger communities. That does most definitely limit where a service member can go to PCS, and it absolutely does limit them career-wise. The challenge, though, is that when we don't offer services, a lot of maladaptive coping mechanisms come into play that you may or may not be able to extinguish later on. And so, it's finding that balance of what you want for your career and what kind of a future you would like for your child to have long term. Well, I think that initially, at least, perhaps parents are, number one, afraid of demanding services, or they don't really understand exactly what they need. And sometimes their child will have worse behaviors for a time until the parent goes, wait, we need help with this. And then you'll see parents start doing more research, start discovering what it is that would really be beneficial for their child, and then start making demands of medical professionals or school professionals and start making some headway for their child. Parents I encourage parents who really feel like my child, I've done some research and I really feel like my child is on the spectrum, to find other highly respected professionals in the field to do additional testing and offer a secondary diagnosis. And to be open and honest with the secondary person you go to. The first person did not diagnose my child with autism. These are the reasons why I believe my child should have this diagnosis, and to be open and honest about that. Well, and one of the things I would say to parents with children on the autism spectrum is this is not a diagnosis where you can just go, okay, well, maybe the meds will work. Oh, well, maybe the teacher will. If you are the parent of an autistic child, plant your feet and dedicate yourself to doing whatever you need to do to get this child the services that they need. It may not be automatic in your school district. It may not be automatic in the places that you go for your medical care, but make the correct demands for your child, because you're the authority on your child, and you're the spokesman for your child, and it's your duty to make sure they have everything that they need, because many times they can't ask for it themselves, and they don't know that they need it. So parents really, really have to take an active role in the upbringing of their child, especially with an autism diagnosis.